Hi everybody, my name is Ramy Vance, and when people ask me what I do for a living, I like to say that I write vampire novels for a living. Today I am going to read to you one of my son's favorite books, and my favorite books, Rocks in My Pocket. To start at the beginning, the Woods family lived on a farm on top of the highest mountain in these parts, away up where the wind is your neighbor all year round. The farm was on old rocky soil, but it was the best the family could afford, and so they worked out a living any way they could. They raised knee-high corn and walnut-sized potatoes and called them a good crop. You'd hear no complaints. Their house was drafty, their animals skinny, and their clothes patched out of what was in hand. But the one thing that they did have was pockets, and that was mighty important, for in the pockets they carried rocks. Rocks? Yes, rocks. Every morning, when they'd set out to work, Father, Grandma, Tommy, and Jenny, Father would always say, "Be sure ye put your rocks in your pockets now. Put the rocks in your pockets, or the wind will likely blow ye away." And he was right, for the wind did blow fierce across the mountain fields. So Father and Mother and Grandpa and Tommy and Jenny would pick up rocks and carry them in their pockets off into the fields, and not one of them was ever blown away. The rocks were a lot of fun too. Tommy and Jenny would often play pass with them or hide and find games. And even Mother and Father and Grandpa would frequently worry the stones around in their pockets, just good to know they're there. Grandpa would say, "Who knows when my old dry bones would end up if this wind ever got a hold of me." In the evening after supper, Grandpa or Mother or Father would often tell a story they remembered from their early days. As the tales were told, you might see one or the other rubbing one of the rocks in their hands. In the cold of winter, these same rocks would be set in the fire or taken out and wrapped in heavy socks to lay between the cold covers. They were, as any of the family might have told you, mighty handy rocks. There was always a heap of them, smooth and slick, stone by the chimney, gleaming from all the rubbing and polishing they got. But once, after a hard winter and a miserable springs, the rocks became more than handy. They became, well, you'll see. One day in the early summer, a couple of high fancy ladies came from the city by looking for antiques, for what they might impress their neighbors. But the Woodsies didn't have much in the way of antiques. Nope. Father Wood said they didn't have anything to sell. But just then, one of the ladies noticed the pile of rocks by the chimney. "My, but aren't they beautiful?" exclaimed the one. "Indeed," echoed the other. And they were kind of pretty, slick as glass, bright as the stars, and the colors in them that just shone right through. "Well, well, I've never seen stones like these before. What kind are they?" asked the first. "Well, I don't know them by name. They're just plain old rocks." "Will you sell them to us?" "Well, I really don't have any reason to sell them to you." "Oh, but we'll pay you a fair price. They're kind of rare now, aren't they?" Well, Father Woods began to catch on then, and he said, "Well, yes, maybe they are. You don't see many of this kind where you come from, I guess." "What would you take for them?" the ladies asked sweetly. And then he told them a reasonable price, and they paid him. And the ladies were thrilled. From the way they talked, there wouldn't be anyone in all of Pittsburgh or New York, or wherever they came from, that had stones like these. So they went back to their homes, put their stones on display, and bragged all over them. That night after supper, Father said, "Well, the corn's big enough to hoe in the morning, but before you kids go to bed, find a bunch of new rocks and get them in your pockets. Bring back some for your ma and grandpa, and we'll grab us some more later. Who knows? We might be in the rock selling business." And that was true enough. Folks started coming from cities and towns far and wide. The money the Woods' family made from those rocks drove the hard times from their door for good. Now, they didn't give up farming or their mountaintop, but it was a little easier with the extra money to feed and the animals, to have warmer clothes, and so on. But of course, there were those who tried to take advantage. They would come from the cities and ask about the stones. And they tell Father Woods that those by the chimney weren't quite right, and ask him if he knew where they might find some similar ones. Father Woods, being an honest man, would tell them. And those folks' eyes as big as slab-sided sandstones would go gather up heaps of field rocks. They thought they were awfully clever not having to pay Father Woods for them. But of course those rocks never quite shone the way the ones in the chimney corner did, and nobody back in the city was impressed by them either. And those folks took them would never figure out why. I guess they never lived on top of the highest mountain, never carried those rocks in their pockets all day long, hoeing, stooping, summer, spring, fall, and winter, never played pass with them, never curled under a blanket with those rocks nestled between their feet, never sat at the fireplace rubbing those rocks while the old stories about hard work and patience filled their heads. No, I bet they never did. But I have. And those rocks in my pockets still keep, these rocks in my pockets still keep my feet on the ground, even in the windiest weather. I hope you like this book, Rocks in My Pockets. One of my absolute favorite stories, and a true gem. Thank you, guys.